Hola amigos, welcome to Lección 2 of the video series. You'll notice that these videos correspond with documents that I either have provided you in the past or am providing you now that are going to help you learn some concepts that are really important for gramática en español. Typically in the beginner, which is where we're at now, everything sort of builds off of itself. So I recommend going in order as best you can. And I also would recommend going back and listening to these again, pausing, rewinding, doing the exercises along with me or afterward. Really make the most of this as a practice as opposed to just, I watched the video, so I learned it. Because a lot of these things are tactile. You just need to do them yourself for things to stick. So now that you're here, my hope is that you've already gone through Lección 1A, so 1A and 1B. We talked about pronunciation, some kind of lay of the land for Spanish bits and bobs. And now we're getting into a little bit of, I won't call it the weeds, but some of the details about gender, plurality. We're going to learn our first verb today. So I'll always aim to keep these videos pretty short, which means I'm going to go at a pretty good clip. I would highly recommend having your finger near the pause and the rewind so that if this is going too fast for you, you can go back or take a second to take some notes. I'll also put the document that we're working on up as a video companion. So if we've taken any notes or if I've done some exercises with you as an example, you'll have those filled in so that when you go back, hopefully within 48 hours to look at this all over again, you'll be able to go, oh yeah, that's right. We did try a couple examples and this does make sense and so on. So let's just kick in, shall we? We are going to start out all the way up at the top. Okay, so first thing we got to grapple with is what I alluded to perhaps in 1A, talking about there's no the, right? We don't get to just use a generic version of the. So we had spoken about things being masculine or feminine. We had spoken about them being definite and indefinite articles. And I know that might feel like, what does that name even mean? I don't remember. And again, I don't want to ever drown you in grammar terms just to show I'm fancy, but if you ever want to Google these things or look up a topic in a textbook, you kind of got to know what they're called. So when we're talking about the different versions of the, we are talking about definite articles. And if we're talking about a, and, or some, we're talking about indefinite. But either way, they both incorporate gender. So, como hemos discutido, as we've discussed before, we don't have gender in English for nouns. So if I say the pen versus the water bottle versus the scrunchie, the house, they're all the same the, or a, and, or some, right? But Espanol is going to separate those out. So something we need to be aware of is this is not natural to you. And I know that's going to take a little bit of practice and a little bit of time. So please just be patient with, okay, this is kind of a buckle up type of thing, right? We may be familiar with la and las, el and los. Those are our 4 different versions of the. So anytime you think the in English, you want to be really breaking that into sort of a decision tree of 4 options where you're asking yourself, how many things are there, which is plurality, we'll talk about in a second, and also what is the gender of the noun that I'm working with. And remember that it doesn't really matter what it's used for. It could be a dress or a beard trimmer or whatever, and it doesn't really matter because it's just based off of how the word is written. That's going to determine the gender, not its use or who it's used by. So what are we going to do to remember these, right? That's the big question I always get. And if you've done Duolingo or if you've done any work up to this point, if this is just review for you, you've definitely learned in the past, oh yeah, it's O's are masculine and A's are feminine, but that's a little bit too basic. We need a little more. So I try to keep it simple enough that you can still remember the acronym, but it's not so basic as everything's an exception and you only get these 2 things to remember. So if you want to take it to the next step, you would try to remember not just the letter A or A, you would remember DNA. And in that umbrella, you learn all of these, which if you're like me, you do not want to be putting all of those on a flashcard or trying to even make all those sounds. You're like, sion again, the same way, I guess. Tad, dad, tud, like it's tough. Okay. And so my recommendation is don't look at exactly what this structure is. And this, by the way, always has something in front of it. Like it might be conversión or amistad. So these words, these aren't even a word. They're just the endings. I would look at the last letter. Note that it's an N or a D or an A like we talked about, and that's really your guiding force, okay? So when you see manta ending in an A, you go la. Ciudad ending in a D, la again, D, so just bear that in mind. And as always, I know this may make me sound like a bit of a lawyer, but it's like, don't hold me to this every single time, okay? This is not a binding contract that, okay, she told me every time it's a D, N, or A, I'm going to use feminine, and she lied. I know. And I know it's going to be frustrating to memorize the irregulars like el día and la mano, where they're flip-flop from what they're supposed to be. But every language has exceptions as far as I know. So you're going to have to learn them bit by bit. But this, if I'm putting a random number on it, would probably help you remember about 80% if you have these two. And then you're just learning that 20% of exceptions, which is going to be the case in a lot of different areas of this language. Learn as much as you can with a simple rule and then take on the exceptions as they come. So por aquí, we've got masculine, which I like to think of this like kind of like a Greek grandmother or something, right? Where it's like Oma. Like I know that's kind of like, Oma is like a grandma, but I remember this because the O is fine and we love it, but the ma is the tough part because it's actually more so that I'm asking you to look at the A and see if there's an M before it. So you can't just look at the last letter. So maybe I did lie a little bit. You have to look for an A and just make sure it doesn't have a ma, because one of my favorite words that people struggle with is problem. It's not actually problema, like we've all been taught living here in the US. Tragedy, I know. Pero it's el problema, and that's because of the MA ending. So just keep an eye out for that. But typically there's a lot of nouns that end in O, like gato, baño, vino. And those you don't have to worry about exceptions for most of the time. They're going to just be masculine, pretty straightforward. And then there's problems like there's ending in an E that kind of ends up getting somewhat split between the two you have to memorize. And then there are plenty of other letters I didn't list here in both of these, and I know you're aware of that. And that's where that 20 or so % comes in that we're going to be memorizing as we learn. So if you want a little mini quiz for your own purposes of what the genders should be for each of these, I'm going to leave this for you because I want it to be kind of a take-home assignment. And again, that 48-hour rule, I know it's not always possible. Say you have a lesson or you're watching this video at 8 p.m. I know you're not maybe getting this done tonight, sure. But within the next day or two, just don't let all of this momentum and like good feeling of, I'm getting it, or, I have questions, but I'll write them down. Make sure that gets done. The sooner the better. And the other thing to bear in mind is you're going to be learning a lot of new vocabulary. I'm not going to go into this much here, but I am going to start putting together material about how to study and what our plan is and kind of what we're going to do to stay on track. But you're going to be learning a lot of vocabulary, both in the Spanish step-by-step book. If you're following along in there, this would correspond with chapters 1 and 2. It's kind of straddling them. But you're going to get so many palabras, so many words, and you're just going to need to find a good home for each of them. So I'm taking a little pause here to just say, here comes the tidal wave of words, okay? Because when we say, let's learn some nouns, I mean, think of how many nouns there are out there, right? So we want to have a system and make sure you chat with me or read up on those resources and create a capture plan for all this vocabulary and for how you're going to study it once you have it. So, okay. Now, aquí, we've got plurality. Okay, so first we just talked about gender. We're just picking either or. Is it going to be the la and las or the el and the los? And now we're going to have to decide, which of those it is, right? So we got the gender side, and now we're getting the plurality of, is it one cat or multiple? And so we go to plurality when there's two or more of something. So it doesn't matter how many necessarily, just like English. But we're going to do plural this way. So let me zoom in a little so it's easier to see. So basically with English, whether we know this or not, and it's no shade if you don't, because come on, who really thinks deep down, like, how am I pluralizing my nouns in English? Like nobody thinks that. But you'll notice that in English, you're slapping an S on. You're still using the same the, we knew that, right? But now all you're doing is adding an S, ta-da. Not hard, right? However, in Espanol, it's still pretty simple, if I may, because we're still adding an S. It's not like it's some random other letter or we're using a different alphabet or something terrible, but I have to pluralize my the. I mean, the nice thing about this, I like to joke that English loves mystery. English will say the and you're like, literally anything could be next, right? You have no idea. And if I'm like a presenter, I'm like, introducing the, and you're like, could be literally any noun, right? But in Espanol, if you hear los, you're like, okay, at least I know it's going to be something masculine and something plural. I at least have a little more info. I know I've went one of 4 ways already before I even hear that it's gatos is the word. So just keep this in mind. Everybody in the beginning misses this. So many times I'll hear somebody go like all the way with gatos, and I'm like, yes, but forget that it can't be el gatos, it has to be los. And that is just standard operating procedure for, hey, I'm American learning Spanish as a second language or third or whatever. So don't get too frustrated with it. Just make sure that you're kind of keeping an eye out for it. And if you ever do an assignment, and again, you want to go back and touch it in another 48 hours, you could warm up by just checking your answers and saying, do I still agree with what I said before? Because sometimes you'll notice your own mistakes, which is A, for a lazy teacher, fantastic that I don't have to catch them. And B, for you, it's fantastic that you're going, ooh, I think I would tweak that, or I'm not going to do that next time. I'm going to remember. Okay, carrying on, off my soapbox. So we got la, las, which we must do, and we add an S. So far, our vowels love to just get an S added, no problem. If you recall our indefinite articles, which we haven't really spoken about yet today, we have un turning to unos. It's not uno, that's the number 1. So it's not uno, it's un to unos and una to unas, and then we're still just pluralizing with an S for each of these. Masculine, feminine words, pretty simple. Pero we are going to run into situations where we don't end in a vowel like la verdad. And if that's the case, we're going to have to add an ES, because if you hear this, you might catch it. Verdades is like, it just sounds very flat and choppy and American, honestly. But if we say verdades, I'm giving a little push or a little buffer between my D and my S, because we don't really want to have those vowels sitting next to each other like that. Okay. So if you notice you're saying doctors, it's like, okay, doctores. And then lastly, there's a little rule around Z's that turn into CES. It's a teeny tiny fraction of the time. So it's on here. I have shown it to you, but it's not the most important thing that we could ever do. And I know that. So the práctica ahora, the practice that you would do now, is to take whatever word I've given you in Spanish, the noun with its associated el, la, los, las, or un, una, unos, unas, and you're just going to make it plural. So I'll try one of these with you just because this is not something we've done yet. I'll choose the hard one, I promise. So you'll notice all of these end in vowels. That's not too bad. But for this one, I say, okay, I'm starting with la. I'm going to have to pluralize that. And instead of just slapping an S on here, like I was hoping to do, since I'm ending on an N, I'm going to have to buffer that out with an ES. So my final answer on this one would be las canciones. And here's a huge nerd alert. If you find this boring or not helpful, sorry, lo siento, but check it out. It had an accent here for la canción. And I want to just give you a little practice with what you just worked on in 1B. If you're coming straight from 1B video, you know that we were supposed to be pronouncing the accent first, right? If we see one, we're like, yes, my work is done. I'm going to pronounce that. All is well. We don't have one here. Okay. And the reason for that is because it took care of itself. Nerd, right? Nerd alert. So it went from, now it's ending in an S. So I'm pronouncing my second to last vowel, which just happens to be the O by default now. So this one will sound like la canción, and the one down here will be las canciones. So I'm still pronouncing my O. Isn't that cool? Okay, you're going to try the other ones on your own just to give it a try, but at least we have one example here for you to go off of. Hopefully that will be helpful. So I'm going to pause right here. And if all the things that I said kind of just like washed over you, but you feel like you need to go back and try this practice right now before we're taking like a hard right into a different topic in this lesson, please do that. So please pause, fill these in, see if you're happy with your answers. You can check them against like a Spanish dictionary or a Google Translate or word reference if you want to know. If you want to send them to me, feel free to do that as well. You also have your choices of el and la that you could fill in. And this is just going to kind of give you a nice recap of what we covered. If you've already done that, or this is review for you and you're like, no, I'm here for the Sarah, let's do this, then let's keep going. So ahora we have our first verb ever. We learned a bunch of phrases in 1A that used a bunch of verbs. I totally understand that, but this is the first time that we're actually learning how to interact with and conjugate, which is a big fancy grammar term, this first verb of ours, which means to be. All verbs in English, when they start as an infinitive, are going to sound like to be, to go, to visit, to take, to whatever. So that TO is kind of just built in. That's how we do infinitives in English. Spanish doesn't. Spanish just has a verb that ends a certain type of way. Those three ways can be AR, ER, or IR. So this one's an ER. We'll totally come back to this. It's not important right now, but it's just an intro. Now, here's the problem, okay? Because I'm trying to be transparent. This isn't the only to be, okay? Anyone that has used Duolingo or any platform and tried to play a game, it's always testing you between ser and estar. And we spoke a little bit about it in 1A about, well, why is it different to say you are here versus you are there in the different scenarios. And this is because Spanish has a fork in the road and says, okay, well, if you're trying to talk about permanent characteristics and who you are, and all of these things, which I know look a little daunting, right? It extends, in case you were worried. There's a whole list. That's when we use ser. Do not worry about that right now because you don't even know the other verb yet. It's estar, and we're going to cover that later. So we're breaking it into bite-sized, hopefully, chunks. And the other good news is I do not expect you to learn this list. I mean, upon pain of death, I don't know that I could list them all in this order with these exact words, but that doesn't mean I don't know how to use this verb. I use a little bit of a lazy gal method, and here's how I do that. I know what all of these are conceptually, and I'm going to talk to you about them really briefly right now. But instead of memorizing these, I remember the overarching theme of permanence and some little hacks I'll give you for remembering what ser is for. And I just use that. And by the time we get to estar with a nice, short, and sweet list, I'm going to say, I just want to learn that one. And if it's not something on the estar list, then I guess it must be ser. I've been teaching it that way for, I don't know, 7-8 years. And most people have found that to be easier because this topic can be way too daunting if not. Okay, so let's take a peek here. We've got date and time. So if we are talking permanent, it's not that the clock is ticking, it's that we are on a date and time system that states that today, in fact, is Halloween. I know I'm not dressed up, don't be upset. Today's Halloween, and that's pretty much universal across. It's always October 31st, type of thing. So those things are set in stone is how I remember it. Your nationality and gender and ethnicity, yes, they can change, but they're pretty permanent because it takes a lot of paperwork or medication or whatever to make changes to those things. Personality traits. Again, if you are, hit by a car and you get this change in personality or something, that's fine. And that might happen. It's not that common though, right? So it's more so common that you're going to have similar personality traits throughout your life. Description is maybe I say, oh, the party is so fun, you should be here, or oh, that sweater, it's wool or whatever, right? That's also what things are made of, but you could be describing it as itchy or something. It's an itchy sweater. And then your profession can absolutely change throughout your life, but it's not, again, there's more paperwork. You got to go through an HR presentation or file some papers with the state, who knows? We've also got possession, which I think I'm spelling the Spanish way here. Does it have 2 S's on both? Who knows, right? What it means, though, is she is my best friend, for instance. I'm kind of possessing her in a non-weird way, I promise. Where you're from. So if you grew up in the South, you would say, I'm from the South, and that's not going to change because you're talking about it from a perspective where you already grew up, right? So it's over. And then an event. So this is one of the hardest ones, and I'll explain more why in the next lesson, but it's going to be that you have to remember, oh, this is kind of a caveat. But if I say the wedding is in the mountains or something, I'm going to use this permanent ser for it. And my only way of describing this to students is you already put the deposit down. You sent the RSVPs, the cake is being made. It's all already done is kind of how you want to think of it. And that's why it's ser. So if you want to go back through that and take some notes, if you want to screen cap this right here and say, okay, I'm going to try to write something on the side about what each of these means, whatever works for you. If you want to highlight the ones that you think are going to be hardest to remember, like I said, I'm not expecting you to have these memorized. There's not going to be a pop quiz of, is that a profession or a possession situation? Because that's just stupid, to be honest. Now, down here, though, is where it gets interesting. Okay, this is where we get into our first conjugation table. So what you're going to notice on this one is all the people on the left-hand side you were told about in 1A. And you're like, yeah, but I don't remember. And that's totally fine. We're going to talk about it. I made a right-hand column only for this lesson plan where we're going to talk about who everybody is, right? So I is yo. You as like an informal person is tú, right? If you are talking to somebody formally, right, you would use usted instead. For he and she, you use el, ella. Nosotros is we, right? So any group that you are a part of, vosotros is only in Spain, so I spend very little time on it. And then ellos and ellas and ustedes means like a they group of varying genders. So for instance, this is at least one male, this is all female. So we only have one they. In English, there's multiple. And then ustedes is you all. So if you're outside of Spain, basically everywhere else, you're going to use ustedes for. Okay, so that's a little review of who the people are. I would write them all out, maybe make your own table, like aside from this, where you have yo in one column and I in the other column, tú and you informal. And just make sure everybody has kind of their place, because one of the things that really trips people up is sometimes they start to really memorize these conjugations and they're like, ooh, all right. But then I'll say, okay, how do you say you all are? And they go, you all. I don't know who that is, right? So we really do need, as a starting point, to do this, what is called conjugation, right? So to match ustedes with son, I have to know I wanted ustedes in the first place. That makes sense. Okay. So we're creating kind of this synapses firing between your English and your Spanish brain. You want to talk to a group of people and you're looking right at them. You go, okay, I do want ustedes. Or you go, okay, everybody left. And now I'm just talking to one person. You'd say, okay, do I feel good about this person? Like I know them as a friend, or are they somebody, are they my boss or something? And so I want to use usted. So these are all the scenarios you want to be thinking about. You kind of think about it like a TV show. These are all the characters and you just want to know based on each scenario, which one am I using? I'm going to pronounce for you who everybody is in terms of like what conjugation they need to go with. So we'll do both now. So yo goes with soy, yo soy. Tú eres. Él, ella, usted es. This is like the most common form of it, I'd say. You probably heard nosotros or nosotras, if it's all women, somos. Vosotros or vosotras sois, like kind of like soy sauce made short, you know? And then ellos, ellas, ustedes son. So not son or son, but son. Okay, fantastic. So we want to make sure we pronounce all of these a couple times over. We write these down, like please write these down. They're very, very important to remember. And then when we get down here, I'm going to go through this quickly because I promised I was going to keep these videos brief. We're already past the 20-minute mark and I know people start to glaze. This is a lot of information. So what I really want you to do is be selective. I'm going to say this a million times in these videos, so you're going to get very sick of it. But I don't want you to take all of these people and all of these nationalities and each of these professions into your list and practice them daily. That's just going to be too much. It's going to dilute the value because of how many there are. So we don't want to do that. That's not our goal. I'm going to pronounce these. And if you have this printed out or you have a sheet of paper with you, I would be pausing and writing down only the ones that you think you're going to say. Okay. If you're learning Spanish for work only right now, you don't really need boy and girl probably. For the moment, right? You're going to be more selective around woman and man. For instance, if you're speaking Spanish with your kids, it might be the opposite. So let's try this. We've got la mujer, el hombre, el chico, and la chica. So those are our 4 people we're starting with. Of course, there's more. For our nationalities, or I know this is also like continent, but just hear me out. Americano, or americana. So remember, we can make just adjustments to gender, right, as well for our adjectives. So if I'm American as a woman, I'd say americana, Latino or Latina, europeo or europea, that one's rough, africano or africana, asiático and asiática. And just notice I'm really hitting this A because I'm being told to by that accent. These are just kind of more regions. It's very broad. There's like in the complete Spanish step-by-step book, if you're following that, there's a section that's like every single country. Like if you want to say Dominican versus Danish, like there's everything. I think this is a better starting list for now, just keeping it simple, pick the ones you want. And remember too, that for anything that has this, I mean, it can be plural too. So if our entire family is Latino, it could be somos Latinos, plural. So we'll put more practice into that with time, especially as we start writing sentences. Couple people that you might be wanting to, I'm just giving a very basic list here. We would want to make sure we add your specific role or your specific title, how you describe what you do. So maestro or maestra, abogado, abogada. This one does actor, actriz, kind of like we do, actor, actress. Same here, hombre de negocios or mujer de negocios, your choice. And then enfermero or enfermera for a nurse based on gender. So just keep those in mind. These are some and not all professions. If you have a 30-second or less elevator kind of pitch on what you do, and it doesn't fit into here, that would be something to definitely research and make sure that you're able to communicate. Now we've got some blanks to fill in, and we're going to fill them in using this table. Okay. So if you want to drag and drop it, if you have a digital copy of this lesson, if you're writing it down, like you're looking back and forth between the sheet you're filling in and the chart, it's not cheating. I hear this all the time. You're not cheating by learning this, imprinting it upon your brain, especially if you're visual. You need to see this chart out in the world. So putting it on your refrigerador, your fridge, or next to your coffee pot is where I put things, or in your bathroom mirror. It's going to force you to look at this a little more often. It's just going to look familiar. Right now, it looks like a foreign language, but you can get more acclimated, I promise. And so what I'm doing and filling these in is I'm using the context of the sentence to try to figure out what goes in the blank out of those choices in that middle column I just showed you. So I'm going to pick a hard one because I know you can handle the easier ones on your own. So I'm going to take mis padres. I'm going to start here. Reason being, there is no option for mis padres here. So this is going to require a little critical thinking. You're going to have to kind of go out of the box a little bit. In the beginning, I would recommend using process of elimination. So I would say, well, I'm not my parents, even though I possess them with my, which I know we haven't learned yet. I'm not my parents, so that's not it. It's not a singular you. It's not like you are. It's multiple people. So I go, wait a minute. If it's multiple people, then these first ones are out. Can't be any of those first three. So I'm left with these. If I'm saying my parents, it's not me, right? Then I'd have to say like my family or something. Maybe I'm a part of that. And then vosotros is I'm not talking to them. I'm talking about them, right? I'm saying my parents are, not y'all are. Salud to myself. And then we've got ellos, ellas, and ustedes. And here's where we want to be. Okay. This is where my parents, like if you've ever done this in your head, like my parents, comma, they are, that's how you're going to remember. So I would be using essentially ellos as a replacement, but I don't have to replace them and keep it. What I need though, is to scroll over to the right and go, okay, this is the conjugation I'm looking for. I'm looking for son. So I would go here and say son. And my whole sentence would be mis padres son abogados. And we'd go with that. So, entonces, if there's anything else on here that looks a little tough, la fiesta. I mean, because who doesn't just talk about parties all the time, right? La fiesta. Again, not going to find that anywhere in your chart. So I'm using process of elimination again. It's one party, la, singular, which means now all my bottom three are out, right? I'm not the party, even though that pains me, right? I'd love to be the party or the life of it, but that's not right. You're not a party either. It's just like a third person kind of, the party is, right? And this is our closest version of is. He is, she is, the party is. So I'm going to borrow this S, and I swear you're going to see this everywhere now. You're going to use it all the time. And what you may not know, maybe fiesta was a word you knew, maybe not. You might not know la ciudad. That's okay. If you want to look these things up because you're like, this is bugging me, I need to know, by all means, go nuts and look it up. If you don't feel that urge, it's okay as well. You could just say the party is in the something, and you'd know that, okay, this is an event. So the party is an event. I guess that's why I'm using ser. And you want to be thinking that throughout. I mean, I'm giving you the fact that this is going to be ser, but eventually you can probably tell I'm going to be asking you to decide between ser and estar, which is what happens in the next video. So definitely come back to try that, but only when you feel really confident filling these in. You also may want to check out, I'm always sharing that New York drill for ser and estar practice. Later, I'll have you be doing that, but you really just want to be practicing your conjugations, putting your table somewhere visible, filling all of these in, checking your answers, and writing your own sentences would be great, because up here I provided you some ideas. And let's say you go, okay, I'm going to take 5 of these, cinco, and then maybe you try to write 5 different sentences so that they make more sense. They have more like tangible benefit to you. So that's my recommendation for this lesson plan. I know we just learned a lot. So let's summarize for a second. We went through gender. So knowing if the word is feminine or masculine, using DNA and OMA. We went through plurality, which was where we talked a little bit about, is it el or los, la or las, and basically how do I make that shift? And am I also making a shift to the noun? Yes, right? We're making a shift to the noun and to the form. We also learned our new verb ser, which is one of 2 that we're going to be using to talk about to be. And we'll get much more nuanced and kind of figure out when that's appropriate later on in the next video. But your task is to really learn that first verb and get comfortable with the mechanics of gender and plurality. My recommendations for doing that are complete Spanish step-by-step. I have worksheets as well, just really getting some repetition, and freehand writing sentences with any vocabulary you already have is hugely beneficial, but takes a lot of time. So definitely put some effort in there. And if you need to rewatch this video again, definitely do that. But from now, try to get some practice in on any or all of these topics within 48 hours. That's what I've been saying a lot lately, is like, if you cram right before your lesson, or you watch a video and then give it a week to simmer, it's much more likely that you're going to fall out of it or just not remember everything because it's not as fresh. But I know it's not reasonable to be like, okay, now sit down and study for 2 hours on this topic. So to make it the most flexible, within the next 2 days, make sure you're getting some touch point, whether it's rewatching, filling in some blanks, writing some sentences, vocabulary, whatever it is, so that this becomes a part of your every other day or multiple days a week. I'm getting some practice in. That's how these videos will be most effective, how your lessons will be most effective. Overall, you're going to get the most traction that way, but without having to study 5 hours a day, because we all know that's not reasonable. So best of luck to you when you're feeling really confident in all the content in this video. And I mean like 80% confident, like enough to move on to something new because you feel like you're getting it. I'll see you for Lección 3, where we're going to pit ser against estar and really understand why that is. So muchas gracias for listening, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.